Medha Shri, and I welcome you to Truth Be Told, a unique series by osdotme where we bring to you terrific stories of inspirational people who are making this world a better place with their wisdom, talent, kindness, and hard work. We go deep and wide for real stories that move, inspire, and motivate. And joining us today is international author, the very wise Scott Haas. Born and brought up in America, Scott Haas is a writer, clinical psychologist, and the author of 4 books, including Why Be Happy, The Japanese Way of Acceptance. And that's the book we will discuss with Scott today to learn some tips to achieve the ever fleeting thing called happiness. He spends about 3 to 4 months every year in Japan, and we're very thankful to him for taking our time for Truth Be Told. So let's welcome Scott to the show. I'll add him to the stream right away. Hello, Scott. Welcome to the show, os.me's Truth Be Told.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. And the moment I received your book, which is earlier called UK Reru, I thought I had to speak to you and get some insights into why happiness, how to be happy, and some secrets. So very excited to have you here and learn some tricks to be happy. And I hope that by the end of the show, our viewers and I are happier than what we are now.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm very sure about that. So let me shoot my first question. Why this book called Why Be Happy?
Well, I think that each day, all of us have a lot of distractions. And these distractions can be based on what we see around us or what we remember about our lives or what we're planning for the future. And it's very hard to be present. It's very hard to go through your day and experience the day as it comes to you. And I think when that happens, we are not at our best in, say, relationships with our families, our loved ones, our work colleagues, and just our own private work, getting things done on our own, whether it's hobbies or activities. So if you're happy or you feel a sense of well-being, you can feel more part of things. You don't feel separated.
Right. So then, how do you think of writing this book? When did this idea come about? What was that moment when you thought, okay, I have to write this book?
So I have been going to Japan for about 20 years now. And I went there by accident. I was invited by a pretty famous chef in New York, Danielle Boulou, in 22, I think, or 23. And it was after Lost in Translation had come out. And Danielle was invited by Park Hyatt Tokyo, because that's where the movie was filmed, to visit. And he invited me and 2 other writers to join him. And I had no desire to go. I was a Europhile in a lot of ways. And so I said, well, what are my obligations? And he said, you just come for 5 to 7 days and you don't have to do anything. So there we were in Tokyo, and it just blew my mind. And so one of the things that blew my mind about being in Japan subsequently, I've been back about 28 times now, is that there's a way in which people do not react visibly to situations around them. And I found that spellbinding. And I also found the first word I learned in Japanese was sumimasen, which in different situations can mean I'm sorry or excuse me. But what the way in which I saw it used that led in part to writing this book was it was a way of apologizing to the person for taking them away from what they were doing to attend to your needs. So I'm sorry that you have to attend to me when you were doing something else. And I thought that's really interesting, that in other words, you're thinking about someone else rather than yourself all the time, which is so different than, with all due respect to the States, it's very different than the way it is in the States, which is more self-involved, self-oriented. And I found that approach that I use a lot at home here in the United States, or also in Europe when I'm there, to be extremely useful.
My next question to you is, so we've spoken about why be happy, why the book. Now the question is, how to be happy?
So my goal, my goal in life is to fit in. So one of the things that happened a lot during the pandemic, certainly the first 3 months, where are you based? You're in India, but where are you based in India? Where?
Yes, the capital city, Delhi, in India.
We're in Delhi. So I don't know what it was like in Delhi for the first 3 months, but in Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm based, we really didn't know what was going on. We had no idea where this was going. We didn't know. We didn't feel safe. We had a president who didn't show the kind of leadership that many of us had confidence in. So we were really paralyzed emotionally in a lot of ways. So all of the offices that I worked in were closed, etc. So I found when I took walks with my dog at the time that the birds, the birds around me, the trees around me, the environment around me, they were not questioning what they were doing. They were, there it was. And that's the thing about Japanese philosophy, Shintoism. You want to be part of the things around you. In other words, when you see a tree, the tree isn't saying, how do I be the best tree? When you see a bird, the bird doesn't go, how do I sing this song? I mean, I'm a robin. I sing like a robin. I don't think, well, I'm going to sing like a blue jay. So the idea was, how do we fit into nature? What basically the two questions for being happy that helped me a lot, that still help me, are what does nature expect of me? And how can I meet those expectations? And if I stick to that, which requires a lot of thought every day, literally, then I feel better. I feel happier.
Okay, wonderful. So now, I want to know, what is it that the nature expects from us? What is it? Have you found the answer?
Well, it's not so much an answer as a desire to fit in. And I think that when you're out and about in a forest or even a city, the question is, how do I remove myself from this situation? How do I observe more? How do I place my needs far away from what's going on around me? So to give you an example of an urban situation, for a variety of reasons, I have to take the bus to Albany, New York, which is 3 hours, 4 hours from here by bus, to visit a family member about once a month. And I don't particularly like taking the bus on the highway. So I've decided when I'm on the bus to pretend that I am a German film director named Wim Wenders. And I've decided as I'm on the bus and I'm in the bus station to pretend that I'm in a foreign movie. And that here I am in a foreign movie. I'm in this bus station. Many of the people in the bus station are quite poor because that's the sorts of individuals who take these buses because they're very inexpensive, but I have no other way to get there. I don't like to drive the 4 hours by myself. So I look around and I think, I know, because I've worked with individuals, some of these individuals have recently been released from prison. I see the clothing and the bags. I see people who are really, really quite poor. And I say to myself, this is an opportunity to observe what's going on around you. And by doing that, I feel zero stress. I feel literally zero, because I think I'm in a movie. I'm enjoying watching people. I'm listening to what they're saying. Why are they here? Where are they going? Where did they come from? And so on. And it becomes a story. In other words, you don't only listen to your story. You don't only listen to your narrative. And that makes me very happy. To hear other people's stories makes me happier than having to listen to my own story.
Well, that's very interesting. And there's another theme in the book that keeps coming up. And in fact, your earlier title, which is Ikereru, Happiness and Acceptance Through Japanese Wisdom. So acceptance is something that keeps coming up in the book, and you seem to be a big advocate of acceptance. So I wanted to understand from you, what does acceptance mean?
So in her memoir, Michelle Obama talks about acceptance. And what she says in her memoir is that in order to change a situation, you have to accept it. So let's say you have a friend and you go out, she wants to introduce you to her new partner. So the four of you or the three of you go out to dinner. And during the dinner, this partner is really unpleasant to your friend. He's disrespectful. He says things that are mean, and he goes off to the WC, and your friend turns to you and says, "What do you think? Isn't he the best?" And you say, "You've got to be kidding. That guy is so mean to you. Is he like this all the time? You think he's mean? Yeah, listen to what he said to you." So in other words, for her to change that, she has to accept, if what your observations are if your observations are true, It would be great for her to accept that reality and then say, do I really want to be in that kind of abusive relationship? That's her choice. Or is there an opportunity to change this? Maybe he's having a bad night. Maybe he's really a horrible person. We don't know. But the point is to change the situation, you have to accept the reality of it. And that's what Michelle Obama talks about. In other words, if you experience racism at work, she's basically saying, or in your community, don't dismiss it. Don't say, oh, it's not happening. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Well, maybe it is. It probably is. So what she's saying, in order to change something, accept it first. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation.
Right. Because, in a lot of sense, a lot of times, in fact, I myself have felt that probably when people say accept the situation, what they're saying is you can't change it, so just, resign. But this is a fresh perspective, and I think that gives a lot of sense to the whole acceptance thing.
I mean, certain kinds of things you have to accept. If you visit a family member and they're in hospice and they really don't have long to live, I mean, God love them, and they're in a lot of pain, and spiritual pain, emotional pain, physical pain. They have to accept that they are not going to be physically with us much longer. That's not the same as you're that's not situation's not going to change. There's not going to be a miracle cure. There might be, but chances are there won't. That's a different situation. That's not so much resignation as if you accept that situation, then you can make amends with your family. You can turn to a family member and say, when you were growing up, I have to tell you, I feel terrible about some of the things that you and your mother and I argued about. It's okay, Dad. It's fine. But in other words, that's the acceptance part. But if you're in a relationship that has a potential for change, that's where the acceptance could lead to change.
Okay, Wanda, because I was about to ask you if you could give me an example from your own life where acceptance wasn't easy to you, because acceptance is not really easy for everyone, right? There's some situations where it's very difficult to accept the situation. So, have you had any such experience where it was difficult for you to accept it?
Every day. I mean, every day there's situations. Every day something comes up, literally, for me and for others, where you have to accept it. You're at a grocery store. You're online. A person behind you jumps in front of you, a big person, an unpleasant person who's physically capable of being aggressive, says, I'm in a hurry. I'm cutting the line. So you have a decision to make. You can confront the person and say, look, I've been waiting here for 15 minutes, or the person says, what did you say? So you say, okay, I accept the situation. I'll deal with this for 4 minutes. Every day something happens. You're stuck in traffic. You have an argument with a friend or a family member or a colleague. So yeah, sure. I mean, and the question is what's the goal? In other words, let's pretend you decided not to let that person get away with cutting you in front of the line. I mean, little things, right? And you have the argument. Your day is going to be ruined. It's going to be ruined because people will stare at you in the grocery store. You're going to feel badly for losing your cool. The person might shove you. I mean, who knows? But here's the goal. The goal is to buy the groceries and go home and be with people you care about. And you're done. You're done. So each day we face, I mean, that's what it means to be alive. I mean, every day there's little things that get in the way of our well-being, because each one of us has needs that your needs are not the same as mine. So, and particularly in relationships like family, especially, or colleagues at work, their needs are going to get in your way. And the question, or potentially. So the question is, how do I respond to their needs in a way that my needs are met as well? But it takes an enormous effort. It takes enormous effort.
It is actually. And then to think that somebody who's an authority on acceptance, somebody like you, Scott, if you also have difficulty accepting, it makes me feel better, because then I know that I'm not the only one I'm not a bad person.
No,
so
it's a way.
It's very comforting to know.
No, it's absolutely a way of life. It's not. I mean, it's not so much. I don't think it's psychological techniques per se. I mean, certainly there are techniques, but I do think it's a way of life. You don't turn it on and turn it off. I work currently providing consultative services to a church in Roxbury. Roxbury is the black section of Boston, and it's called the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And I provide services to them in the sense that by their headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, anyone who wants to have a leadership position in the church needs to be evaluated by a psychologist. So they hired me about 5 or 6 years ago to do these clinical interviews. And when I go to the church, the vibe I catch from individuals is so pleasant because it's a way of life that people are constantly saying to themselves at the church, I am not going to react to what's going on around me in ways that make me feel worse. How you if the person if the person at the church is disrespected or spoken to in a way that seems insulting, the vibe I catch is you are not going to define me. You are not going to tell me who I am. I am who I am, regardless of how you speak to me. And that's heavy. And that takes an enormous amount of effort. And that's an example.
That's wonderful. That's actually a very good technique also. So one is to put needs of others above you, and to find a way to serve them and your needs as well. And the other is not let their energy affect your vibe.
Right. And part of the challenge is the needs of others. When you think about it from the standpoint of feminism, it's not, women have done that historically forever. So part of the challenge is understanding that putting the needs of others does not mean giving in I told my daughter when she was 12 or 13, she was asking me about boyfriends and stuff like that. And I said, and what should she do? And so on. Not a heavy, frank conversation, but frank enough. And I said to her, I hope it was good advice. I don't know. I said to her, you should do whatever you like. Okay. But make sure that your needs are the first in any relationship. Don't think about his needs. That's not important. What's important is how do you feel with him? Do you feel safe with him? Do you want what he wants? If you don't want what he wants, don't do it. And I think that women, for obvious reasons, it's the boy's show. So I mean, one of the great books that I read recently is by a writer named Rebecca Solnit, and she's a writer based, I think, in San Francisco. And she wrote a beautiful book called Men Explain Things to Me. And here I am explaining it, but it's a great book. And she talks about how men are constantly explaining things to women, and women are like, you've got to be kidding. And the example she gave was when she was in Berlin and she was at a party, and this guy whose house it was, this rich guy, goes, I want to tell you about this famous architect. And he goes on for like 30 minutes all about this architect. Have you ever heard of him? Finally, he turns to her and she goes, I just wrote a book about him that was published like 2 months ago. Thank you so much for explaining who this person is to me. So you can definitely think of other people's needs, but at the same time, you can't lose sight, particularly for women, of your own needs.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. So Scott, there is this very famous serenity prayer, which says, God, give me the serenity to accept things that I can't change, and strength to change what I can. And give me the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and what I can't change and what I can change. So how do we know the difference between what is to be accepted and what is to be changed? Do you have any tips on that?
Oh, man, I mean, I don't know. I think that each situation, it helps a lot. Again, this comes from Japan. It helps a lot to think about things before you react to them. And that, on a personal level, that's really hard for me. So it's important to remember often that you don't have to say something. You don't have to do something. You can say, let's think about it later. Both of us are angry right now, like in an argument in a marriage, let's say. It's not unusual for me with my wife to say, let's not talk about this right now. It's just, we're both too angry at each other, and we're going to say things to each other, I think, that we're going to be really sorry for having said about an hour from now. So let's take a break. And I think that takes a lot of effort, and particularly outside of, say, marriages. You're at a work situation and your boss is saying something to you. You really can't pull that stunt, because the boss will say, no. We're talking about it right now. Now is the time for us to discuss this. So it's important just to try to create a space in your head and say, almost as if this is not happening. I'm going to think about what this person is saying. something about what this person is saying is reminding me of something in the past that got me crazy mad. This person is having a bad day. This person is like this all the time with other people. This is who this person is. I have to deal with this. Let's think about what you said. I see your point. I will do the very best to respond to what your needs are. Are you going to do what I told you to do? I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to do the very best I can to respond to what you want me to do. And it's hard to do that. I mean, we all meet people who are impossible, just impossible, and they just want to win the fights, and they want the other people around them to feel worse about themselves. But there's fewer of them than there are of people who really want to resolve conflicts. I mean, most of us in our work situations, if we're really, really lucky, and in our families and our marriages, most people want to resolve conflicts. They want to make it better. You know, they don't, it's too much heat. It's too much stress. So I think that accepting that situation, getting into the person's head, but remaining at home with your own thoughts.
Good. That's great piece of advice. And some of the phrases that you used are phrases that we can use in our everyday life situations. So again, thank you for that. And now you also mentioned about Japan and the wisdom, and you spent so much time there, about 3 to 4 months every year. Suddenly, in the past few years, Japanese wisdom has become very popular. It's changing the world. There are books on Japanese wisdom. There is Ikigai, there is KonMari, there is Yukireru. So, what do you think is leading to Japanese wisdom becoming so popular suddenly?
I think there's a novelty to it. It's very different. I mean, certainly in Europe and in the States, there's a what do you call it? A win-lose. There's I win, you lose. And that's not the way things are often done in Japan. In Japan, it's more like, how can we create a situation where everyone feels halfway decent about what's going on here? It's also, as anyone knows who's been there, it's really quiet. It's a quiet place. I think people appreciate the quiet. I think that a lot of Western solutions are pathology driven. And I recognize the value of that. I mean, if you have an illness, whether it's mental or physical, it's good to go to a doctor and say, we're going to treat the cancer this way. We're going to treat the depression that way. Here are some possibilities that will make you feel better. And they often work. To add to that, not to substitute, but to add to that, there's a way in which in Japan, it's not pathology driven. It's more about, how does the group not suffer? How does the group as an entity get along better? And I think that's something that for societies that are so self-oriented, like Western Europe and the States, it's an eye opener.
Okay, wonderful. And while there's this aspect to Japanese wisdom where they talk about being calm and they meditate and they're about each other, there's also another aspect which is underscored by stress and strife and competition and Karoshi, which is about deaths due to overwork. So, could you tell me what do you think of this dichotomy?
Well, Japan, as any society, is not static. So depends on who you're talking to and where you are. So there's enormous problems there. All of my women friends there, many of them are very unhappy because they're often told by employers, and these are individuals who are they're not highly skilled. They're skilled, but they're not professionals per se, like say doctors, lawyers, journalists, and so on. So they have to work for someone, you know what I mean? And so they're often told they have to wear high heels, not just at work, but on the way home in case someone sees them from work. If they wear eyeglasses, they should wear contact lenses. So there's a way in which it's definitely an older guy society, but it's evolving. And certainly I hope, and it depends where, certainly in cities like, Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, the major cities, it's the same everywhere. The more education, the more opportunities, the more women are speaking up for themselves, and getting support from the guys to recognize that there's a failure in the male community. There's some advancement, but certainly there's terrible problems there. I mean, there's terrible issues there. And one of the challenges that you're implying is that there's a way in which acceptance among some people is really resignation. We can't change the situation. That's what it is. But my friends who are in their 30s and 40s and even 20s, they're changing things. They're much more assertive. They're much more independent. They're much more entrepreneurial, let's say. That's a change. But this older generation is going to move on very shortly. So it's not a static society, you know.
Right. Okay, that's interesting to know that, they're evolving and there's these two parts and people are trying to balance those things out. Now, before we move to the final part of this interview, which is just quick 5 questions, I have one immediate question to you. How has writing this book changed your life?
Well, I mean, ironically, strangely enough, the book came out in July of 2020. So that was in the middle of the pandemic pre-vaccination period when, again, it was really scary. And so I found the book to be, on a personal level, a great resource. It calmed me down to think about the book and what had gone into it. And again, taking my dog for a walk 3-4 times a day, what I literally thought all the time, what does nature expect of me? We are in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think the pandemic was a blessing. I don't think that we discovered things about ourselves, but here we were. What can we do with this situation? As opposed to getting angry and frustrated and so on. That's not really sustainable. And it's also just adds to the stress. So here we are. What can we do? And when you think about our grandparents' generation, from say, I don't know, 1932 to 1945, what they went through in almost every country on the planet, or 1949 with India, with every country on the planet, the level of oppression and the level of stress was monumental. So if they were able to get through those experiences, we can get through this. So I thought that the book helped me reflect on our so-called ancestors, and that book helped me a lot in that regard. In other words, contextualizing it, and again, removing myself from the situation and saying, this is temporary. This is not a period of, this is not an occupation. This is not a world war. We can do this. And if we can't do this, then what are we? I mean, then we're failing ourselves and our communities. And again, for those of us who are perhaps somewhat more resilient than others, I felt a responsibility to be positive. And I don't mean mindlessly positive. I mean positive in the sense that, what can we do to make this better? What can we do? So little things like, I listen to music constantly, but I mean, I found anything that you can do that's nonverbal during that period of time helped a lot. So I found myself thinking a lot about, what can I do to help others around me? Because a lot of people were much more scared than I was. I was scared, but but I wasn't as scared as others. So I felt a sense of responsibility to be of use to others.
Yeah, actually, everybody was very scared, especially initially, which is actually the time when your book came about.
Right.
Because we were still trying to figure out what is pandemic, what is, if we all shut ourselves up in our houses and nobody's going out, right. No jobs. Like in India, everything came to a standstill. It was
right.
locked down. You were not allowed to go anywhere. So people were stuck somewhere. And of course, the government was doing everything that they could to help people. But people were trying to help each other. And that was very beautiful. Right in the middle of the strife and all this, fear. And
that's exactly right. And it's interesting because subsequent to the pandemic, well, we're still in the pandemic, but it's much better than it was. I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. A lot of people have gotten a lot nicer.
Yeah.
Boston is not a friendly town. It's a very tough, cold city in a lot of ways. And it's part of the reason it's appealing in a strange way, because it's exciting. But I've noticed when I go to the park or the supermarket, people are much nicer. And I think that people value others, because I think part of it is we were starved for the chit chat each day. And so What are you buying? What's in your cart? Do you know how to use that vegetable? I was thinking about that vegetable myself. How would you cook it? What kind of olive oil do you use? And it's like, wow, what are we doing here? It's so great. So I think that there have been changes. There have been changes in the community since then. Yeah.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And now we come to the final part of this conversation, which is quick 5 questions I'll ask you. Short answers would do.
Sure.
So a book that you would highly recommend to people.
Believe me, I'm not being pretentious. I love Samuel Beckett. The reason I love Samuel Beckett is because he appreciates silences.
Oh, I love him too, actually. I read him when I was in college. I was an English honors student, and I read Waiting for Godot, which is actually one of the most famous plays that he's written. And I loved it because you could just make it to mean anything you wanted to. Right? It could be about people waiting for independence. It could be about women waiting for patriarchy to just disappear.
Right.
It could be just anything, or waiting for God, actually. So I love him too. So
they came out recently about 2 years ago with 5 volumes of his letters. And his letters I love the letters because they show him outside of his literature. And he was such a wonderful, he was in the French Resistance. He was a very brave person who really valued his privacy and silence.
Oh, wonderful. So the next one, because this is supposed to be quick, so I'm quickly asking you this.
I understand.
What do you think about kindness? Any acts of kindness that you remember that changed people's life or your life?
People are kind all the time. I'll give you a very quick example. My son was 4 years old. We were in an Italian-American grocery store in the north end of Boston. He was jumping around, and there's an older customer, and she got really angry at him. And she said, she went over to the owner of the store and said, I can't stand this little boy making all this noise. I don't like it. I'm here shopping. So the owner, a young guy in his 20s, looked at her. He said, lady, that's my son.
Oh, wow. That is so beautiful.
Lady, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she walked out of the store. I was almost crying. I went over to him. I said, that was so nice of you. He said, I'm the owner of the store. I decide what behavior is okay. Your son's fine. I thought, how cool is that?
That is super cool. That's amazing, actually. Yeah, it's a very warm thing. And now I want to go all on it.
I think about it all the time.
So, okay. Do you get frustrated? The great Scott Haas, who lives in Japan, knows Japanese wisdom, has written a book about it. Do you get frustrated?
Well, it's where there's as my wife likes to say, where there's a front, there's a back. So the appeal of this book, or this appeal of trying to be happy or trying to accept, implies that, of course, I get frustrated. Otherwise, I wouldn't be looking for these solutions if I didn't, or these ways of life. I mean, if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't be looking for this. Of course, every day.
Cool, then. So what do you do when you're angry?
So when I had a dog until Christmas, I would take my dog for a walk. I loved my dog. I'm sorry he passed away. There it is. I also cook a lot. I listen to jazz about 3 or 4 hours a day. I write a jazz column for the local Black newspaper. Those 2 things help a lot. Listening to music and cooking, enormously helpful. My wife has not cooked since we met.
So do you meditate?
Well, it depends on what you mean by meditation. So I do not formally meditate, but when people talk to me about their meditation, they say essentially you're doing some form of meditation when you're writing or when you're sitting still thinking about what you want to say. So in that sense, I suppose that's true. I mean, I can sit still for a long time and make an effort not to think about anything. So if that's meditation, perhaps. I haven't formally studied it, but I make an effort to be by myself, for sure.
Okay, great. So the 5 questions are over, but this is my final question to you.
Okay, yeah.
What do your kids say about your book? Have they read it?
My kids? Yeah, of course. My children find me amusing. They are amused by me. Mostly what they do when they call me or they talk to me, they basically limit their questions to recipes for food, which but you have to understand something. I have no social authority. My wife is a primary care doctor. My daughter is a primary care doctor. My son is a professor of political science. I am simply, I'm by myself in my house writing and reading, and I do consultations about 20 hours a week. My family has vastly more social authority than I do. I have no social authority. So they think of me and the book as somewhat amusing because they think, as I say, my daughter will call me about recipes. My son will ask me about how the Boston Celtics are doing because he and I love basketball. But when it comes to discussing ideas, not so much. I am the entertainment in the household. That's it.
All right. That's a good thing. When you're a parent, that's a compliment.
It's a role that I've chosen.
Right then, this brings us to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation, Scott.
Thank you so much. You're a great interviewer. I really appreciate spending time with you.
Great, lovely. And dear community, this is Scott Haas, who was with us, and he's the author of Why We Happy. He has shared some secrets for a happy life. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, osdotme. Oh, and do check out our popular Karma program where we play bloggers to write. This is Medha Shri. Thank you again, Scott, and thank you, everybody. Namaste.
Thank you so much.